Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Only Murders in the Building, Season 3, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, let's start off with Mabel's situation. Obviously, she's kind of sat with this murder situation. Once again, everyone's kind of got their complicated feelings about it. Going back to Oliver, who's stressed about because, his production is being shut down. And he's trying to do everything he can because he doesn't want to repeat because he's been basically in Broadway purgatory ever since the Splash debacle. So he's trying to work his way up. So he's handling things on that side of things, which we'll get to later. Obviously, Charles has the complicated thing of, hey, him and Ben didn't get along, and now that he's dead, they don't really have a chance to kind of make up. So there's that. But let's start off with Mabel, who took pictures of the crime scene immediately. Everyone else was like, oh, we need to go get the police or whatever. But Mabel immediately like, okay, let's take some pictures of, Ben's body. And it's like, she immediately jumped on it. It's like, to be fair, this isn't their first rodeo. It's not even their second rodeo. So, and I love that she's watching Girl Boss, because I forgot, Girl Cop, because I forgot she had said last episode she was a big fan of it. It was a show that he did back in the day, and it meant a lot to her. It's actually really sweet and very heartbreaking when you find out why. Like, she always crushed on Ben, but that show and him in particular hold a special place in her heart, because when her dad died, her mom kind of fell apart, understandably, and would just stayed in her room, stayed inside, didn't really come out. But they connected for 30 minutes. Her and her mom got to laugh together, even though they were in different rooms, which obviously is like a giant metaphor for, we're at different places, because it's like, her mom was grieving, and so was she, but they both handled the grief in different ways. Her mom kind of shut down, and I think that kind of plays into Mabel being who she is, who she's always been very independent, because she kind of had to be in a lot of capacities and in a lot of ways. And so that show, and Ben in particular, meant a lot to her because of that. So, and especially at a time when she's like, I'm 29, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, which I'm like, geez, like, I'm 31 and I still don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I stress about it every single day. So, like, I connect a lot with Mabel in that capacity. But for her, it's a lot of what I brought up last episode. It feels like Mabel feels lost, because she is, which I love what Ben was kind of telling her, like, it's okay. He's like, dude, I was 31 playing like I was a high schooler, but the fact is he saw so many people, like his other peers, who, they weren't making as much money as him, but they were artistically fulfilled playing, like, doing theater shows and stuff like that. And then his regular friends who were just kind of outside of all of this, who just like, hey, started their own family and found their own happiness. And here I am kind of in this nebulous space, not sure what I'm going to do. And Mabel's in that same boat, but it's kind of I'm a quote a video game and I'm kind of talking about this, but it was kind of a situation. I forgot the exact words that Ben had said to her, or rather Ben's ghost. I even love her saying, like, she hasn't talked to a dead person since Tim Kono. And I love him be like, wait, I'm dead? She's like, he's like, I'm just kidding. I kind of already knew that. So, and they even do like the handshake and everything. I actually kind of didn't even realize that. It makes sense consider like her and Tim went back. So it is that interesting parallel of like, these are two murders that kind of, you're the Bunny murder. It's like, it was in like, you were like a number one suspect. So obviously we're going to be drawn into all of that, but these murders hit in so many regards because obviously the history her and Tim had, but also here's, someone that you never really got to know, but you knew because their art impacted you so much. What they did impacted you, especially at a point in your life when you needed it. When you needed to laugh, when your mom needed to laugh, and it connected you and your mom when every other capacity you couldn't really connect except for these 30 minutes where you got to laugh together. And I think that's kind of beautiful. And like I said, just kind of this interesting parallel with the whole Tim murder and how she saw his ghost and how she's seeing Ben's ghost, which I'm wondering, is that going to be a continuous thing or not? Because it's been a while, so I think Mabel saw his ghost like every once in a while, but I don't think it was like a continuous, like all the time. It was just like every once in a while they would do it, I think. All right, I remember the thing that Ben had said to Mabel. It's okay to take your time, just don't waste it. Is kind of the whole point. He's like, yeah, you're kind of a late bloomer like me, that you're gonna figure things out, later in life. And he's like, yeah, just take your time figuring things out, but just don't waste the time that you have, So I thought that was beautiful. But the video game quote I was going to kind of quote was like, it's okay to wonder as much as you want to until you figure stuff out. Wondering like in both the like thought process, but also in the metaphorical sense of like, oh, you're wondering, trying to like in kind, it's okay to wonder is the whole point. And it's okay to kind of get lost in your wondering, but the fact of the matter is, wonder as much as you want to until you're able to kind of stand still and figure things out. So it kind of ties into what he was kind of saying. I thought that was kind of a beautiful moment for Mabel. And like I said, especially if you tie that in with why the show Girl Cop meant so much to her. I think it's so sad that they ended up getting kidnapped by Greg, which I've seen that actor in so many different things. I was trying to remember what it was. I was like, there's something really recently I'd seen him in and I couldn't remember what it was. I believe it was a show, Stumptown, which was a really good show I liked that was sadly cut short. It is based on a comic book, so I would assume the comic book is done. So I could get the ending in that capacity, but it was just kind of a bummer that... because I really like that show, and it's just such a bummer. There's a lot of stuff associated with that, because it got screwed over by COVID. But either way, tangent and all this, I want to say that's the most recent thing I've seen him in, but like he's one of those actors where you're like, oh man, I've seen him in so many things. You know, it's like, oh, I recognize you. It's like, you know, that thing of like, oh, this actor is like, you might not always know their name, but you recognize them. You're like, oh, I've seen you in so many different things. But either way, I was surprised by how that turned out, because it's like, okay, he's a security guard and he's got Mabel and Charles at his house. And I love Mabel. It's like, no, he's close to Ben, because Charles is like, yeah, it seems a little psychopathic, like all this memorabilia and all this stuff from Ben's movies and stuff. I even love one of the projects he did was like he voiced someone named Papa Ant. Like they did that 1,000% on purpose, because Paul Rudd is Ant-Man, or rather I should say, like, well, I guess he is Ant-Man. Because I was about to say, it's like, well, Michael Douglas is Hank Pym, who's also a Ant-Man, but really there's only one Ant-Man, like, actively, and it's Paul Rudd as Scott Lang. So yeah, I'll delineate it just like he's Ant-Man, because there's not technically multiple Ant-Man running around, even though Hank is, and same thing in the case of Janet being Wasp. But either way, all that aside, I thought that like that had to be 1,000% on purpose that they did that. It's like, oh, he voices Papa Ant. It's like they definitely had to squeeze that in there for that purpose. But either way, like it seemed like, oh, like, you know, it's like he's got all this memorabilia from like these TV shows and movies that he did, and then it turns out like, oh, look at all these photos, see, they're pretty close, and Mabel looks at them closer and it's like, oh, these are all photoshopped. It's like, yeah, let's get the hell out of here. And he basically drugged them and knocked them out, and he was going to torture them, because it turns out he was actually blaming Charles. He thought Charles, I don't know if it was necessarily Charles and Mabel, but he believed that Charles, because Ben and him had beef, that he's the one that was responsible for killing him, but he wasn't, obviously. And neither is Greg. He's just kind of an obsessed person. It's actually kind of interesting. I don't want to spoil something. There's a TV show that kind of had a similar thing where like there's a stalker character, but they're not the bad guy. They just happen to kind of coincide with the bad guy in some capacity, but they were someone trying to find the real killer. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting element just to kind of think about. Like I watched something recently and it kind of had, like I said, a similar thing in that capacity. We even got to meet the new detective this season. It's like, yeah, Williams kind of told me about you. It's like, oh, she told you we'd be here? It's like, no, we're checking, like, we were keeping an eye on this guy, and you just happened to be here. It's like, to be fair, like, they went with him because they thought he was a security guard, so it's not like they went with him to investigate, necessarily thinking he was a bad guy. It's like, they kind of accidentally stumbled across. I even love the back and forth where it's like, oh, we found the killer a lot sooner. It's like, yeah, it usually takes us like 8 episodes. It's like, yeah, this time we didn't go accusing someone, having to interrogate a parrot. It's like, yeah, you've been through some wild stuff these past 2 seasons. But either way. We also learned stuff about Charles and kind of his issues with Ben. And what it seems like it stems from. Because we had learned, I forgot what it, I think it might even have been Greg who talked about it. But someone had brought up the fact is that Ben was like fired off his first job when he was like 8 years old. Turns out it was like Brazos. Like it was Charles' show that he got been fired from, and it kind of created a complex. And it's like every time he goes into an audition, he turns back into that 8-year-old kid who was fired, you know? Kind because and that's the sad thing. Charles doesn't even remember. He holds on to those glory days so much and kind of inflates his own ego about it. But it's like, right, it's that thing of you kind of destroyed someone and you had no idea. He had no idea what he did would kind of create such a complex, because he was there was early days. That's like at the height of Brazos, where like he's the man, so he probably didn't think much of it at the time. It's like, oh, the kid acts a lot with his hand, blah 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 blah, not realizing the issues that would stem from it. Because we learn from Ben in this episode where it's like, yeah, he has like a lot of insecurities that he was, he was running the scenes with Oliver, and for him, he got scared. Because it's like, what if I need a weird, like, what if I can't just like be myself? Like, what if I'm not good enough? Maybe I need a weird premise like a girl cop or a Cobra to like actually be able to act. And maybe if it's something outside of that where I've kind of got to be near or like tap into something else, maybe I can't really get there. But it's like, well, we are doing a story of someone getting murdered by a baby rattle, and the number one suspect kind of being a baby, and even kind of go like, yeah, but he brought it. And I love that the lines he's saying are the lines from the opening, where it's like the voiceover of him falling down the shaft about the heartbeat, which obviously comes in heavily because that ties into Oliver's story, but we'll get there in a second. And the fact is, for Charles, he'll never have an opportunity to apologize to Ben to make up for that, which is kind of sad. So now it makes you wonder, like, that 4-month period. Another episode, we are going into that 4-month period. Like I said, it has been like a year or something, but I guess it's like that 4 months is the most important because that's when everyone's together. Like I said, maybe later on in the season, they'll like rewind even further back to be like, okay, this happened to lead up to those 4 months. And then like in that 4-month period, like kind of like stuff prior to that 4 months was a catalyst, and then it really kicked off in that 4-month period that ultimately led to Ben. Because it does beg the question, did someone try to kill Ben, and did they think like, well, I wonder, did someone not like, maybe they were planning on doing it, but maybe they regretted it, and then, oh, Ben's dead, can't do much about it. It's like, oh God, thank goodness he's alive, and maybe that led to a confrontation later on, or maybe the person's like, damn it, why won't you die, and needed him dead. I'm so curious to find out what the motivation was. Was it like oh my God, I didn't want you to die, oh thank goodness you're alive? What if that ends up being the case? What if like we're looking for technically 2 killers, like there's only 1 killer, but technically 2 people attempted, just one of them happened to succeed. So like when he was on stage, he's like, oh, maybe it's something I ate. Maybe someone did try to poison him, but it didn't work. And then like it was someone completely different. I could definitely see that being the case, of being someone completely different that actually killed him. So there's a lot to kind of speculate on that front. Then there's the Oliver of it all. Once again, him trying to get his place, as they're trying to like pull it off. He's trying to talk to Donna and her son Cliff to try and get them to hold off on like, pulling everything for the show. And so he ends up going to the funeral, trying to get like close to Donna and Cliff and try to like get next to some powerful people so that he could talk to them. But no, he gets sent to Overflow 3. They didn't really say anything, but I'm like, if there's an Overflow 3, doesn't that mean there has to be an Overflow 2 and 1? So they're not even, that's how I took it, and they never really elaborated. It felt like there were 2 more rooms that is like, you're so far down below that there's still 2 rooms above you when it comes to it. Maybe this is just the 1 room. Maybe Overflow 3 is all there is. But the fact is they didn't elaborate on that made me think there was an Overflow 1 and 2, but maybe there wasn't. There's also a thing, too, when I'm thinking about it, once again, my brain being what it is. Also, Marvel just being the massive thing that it is. It's just funny because it's like, they've never been in a scene together, obviously, but it's like, well, Harry Styles is in a Marvel movie. He's in the, spoilers, post-credits for Eternals. And so, for him to be at Ben's funeral, which, once again, Paul Rudd, Ant-Man, MCU, so it's just interesting. Once again, it's like so many people have been in the MCU that it's like, yeah, of course there's going to be like parallels and connections. Like even people who've never been in the same movie, just still existing kind of in the same universe. It's just kind of an interesting thing. I then love Oliver ended up running into that critic, was it Maureen, and he asked her to like put her like review out there, because it's like, yeah, like obviously, you know, you can't really review like an opening night show that didn't happen because the lead kind of died but kind of came back and then died again. But it's like, yeah, like you saw the preview show, like put that out. But Maureen was like, yeah, my review isn't going to help. And he's like, oh, I saw, like, you have a tell, like, you close the book, like, when you're really into something, and you close it, like, during the first act, that means something. She's like, I closed it because I ran out of ink. I was going to pan this. It's like, yeah, your leading man, kind of terrible. Your set production was kind of lame. It's like, right, even, I'm not the biggest fan of, like, all the stuff that you make, but everything that you do always sings, and she feels like this was missing kind of that Oliver Putnam, like, touch to it. And I think because he's so afraid of repeating everything with Splash that he can be a little much, that I think he wanted to rein it in. He's like, oh, I want to try something different. And I think that's what it was. He was so scared of a repeat of Splash that he was kind of afraid to go full Oliver. And now it's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go full Oliver. To be fair, that was after he had the heart attack. And I think that was kind of his, that and hallucination, dream, whatever you want to call it, of his son Charles and Mabel singing and just kind of telling him, you know, about like kind of obviously his heart condition and stuff. So now it's a situation like, yeah, you need to kind of remove yourself from stressful situations. It's like, well, his play is about to get taken from him, so his Broadway show is about to get taken from him. So there's that. He's told to kind of back off of dip, which, you know, it's like crack to Oliver. He can't get enough of it. And it's like, right, you really want to just kill me, don't you, Doc? Asking me to stop with the dip. But he now decided that he's going to turn the Broadway show into a full-blown musical. Once again, give it that Oliver Putnam pizzazz and spin to it. You know, kind of give it that feel to it. And so Mabel and Charles let him know, like, yeah, we're solving the murder, but it also turns out what the suspect is potentially one of the people in the Broadway show, because Ben had an extra one of those pocket things, which he had one in his hand, and he ended up giving one to everyone in the play. I keep saying play, the Broadway show. I think it's still allocated to being actually like a play and stuff. So it has to be someone that was potentially part of the crew. So I guess the argument could be like, oh, who doesn't have one, even though he gave everyone. To be fair, Charles didn't get his. I mean, it was in a package, but he didn't like open his and get it until after Ben had died. So, and because they made sure to run through it. It's like, oh, what if he pulled it out of someone's pocket or from around their hair or their neck, or what if it was in their hand? So once again, kind of allocating, it could have literally been anyone. So, but it is definitely someone potential in this production, which screws over Oliver, because it's like, what are you going to do about the leading man situation? What are you going to do about, are you going to recast that character, or, which is also like a meta thing too, speaking of the MCU, because that was like obviously the $1 million question of, what are you going to do about the T'Challa situation? It's like, well, how they handle that versus like how they're handling what seems like to be the Ross situation. Just interesting parallels about just how different people handle different things in a situation like that. You just kill the character off. I would assume the character is vital to the play, so maybe you kind of... I'm so curious to see how they handle it. I mean, how Oliver handles that with the stress, you know, the heart situation, because you know that's going to get so much worse. And especially when his son already had issues with, hey, your work kind of got in the way of our relationship, and hey, we were back to kind of repairing that, and now you have double reason to kind of back away, because hey, maybe we could have our time, father-son time again, and then maybe you'd also kind of lose a lot of that stress when you're not working on a play. But it's like, this means a lot to, once again, this was his shot to get out of, you know, Broadway purgatory because of the whole Splash thing. So we'll definitely have to wait to see how this ultimately all plays out going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.